Welcome back, focused learners. Today's explainer. Today, we're looking at a truly mesmerizing trend in the marine hobby space, jellyfish aquariums. If you've ever stood in front of a giant public aquarium display, just totally captivated by these translucent, pulsing creatures, you might have wondered, hey, what does it actually take to bring that exact magic home? Well, they're gaining serious attention right now as a stunning, highly distinctive alternative to traditional reef tanks. Okay, let's dive into this. And let's start with the big question that pretty much every marine hobbyist asks when they first see one of these minimalist setups. Are jellyfish tanks really easier than reef tanks? I mean, at first glance, a jellyfish tank looks incredibly simple, right? There's no rock, no sand, no dense forest of coral to deal with. But don't let that serene, empty space fool you. The reality is that this simpler look actually hides some very specific, rigid complexities. It's an expectations versus reality check that we really need to unpack before you jump into this side of the hobby. To really understand why, we have to look at the fundamental difference in what these two setups are actually trying to achieve. Think about traditional reef displays. They're all about complex biological webs. They are literally bursting with corals, bright life, and intense biodiversity. Basically, beautifully chaotic ecosystems. Jellyfish exhibits, on the other hand, they are designed for one primary visual goal, and that is calm viewing. We're talking about a totally zen-like, ethereal floating effect. They center on movement, transparency, and usually just a single gelatinous species. You are intentionally swapping out a bustling underwater city for a mesmerizing, slow-moving spectacle.
Section 1. Engineering gentle water flow. Now, what's really interesting about this is
Creating that perfectly calm, suspended animation we just talked about requires some serious mechanical ingenuity. The absolute core of this engineering is a concept called low shear circulation. Basically, this is specialized water movement explicitly designed to keep delicate organisms safely suspended in the water column. In a standard reef tank, water crashes and swirls around to mimic the ocean's surf. But jellyfish are incredibly fragile. If you put them in a standard tank, they'd get sucked right into the filtration, trapped on surfaces, or literally shredded by strong direct currents. It'd be a complete disaster. Low shear circulation prevents this accidental harm by gently pushing the water in a smooth, circular flow, keeping them floating safely in an endless loop. And actually achieving that low shear flow, well, that requires a completely different physical habitat. You've got some very strict tank geometry requirements here. We're talking smooth internal surfaces and rounded edges, absolutely no sharp corners where water flow can stall or a jelly could get stuck. You need specialized flow dynamics specifically calibrated just to suspend the animals. And crucially, there is an absolute elimination of sharp live rock. You literally cannot use the standard building blocks of a reef tank because they'd be a major physical hazard to the jellyfish. So the physical tank itself has to be fundamentally re-engineered right from the ground up. Section 2. The maintenance trade-offs. So if we remove the live rock and all those complex corals, does all the work just magically go away? Well, not exactly. The labor hasn't vanished, it's just shifted. And this brilliantly illustrates how completely different the waste management strategies are. Reef tanks rely heavily on live rock and reef organisms to process biological waste naturally. Plus, they demand intense, specialized lighting for the corals. But jellyfish tanks? Okay, they have zero coral lighting needs, but because they completely lack that biological live rock filter, they lean super heavily on mechanical filtration and consistent manual water changes. Managing a multi-organism balance in a reef is basically traded in for maintaining extremely strict water chemistry in a jelly tank. So the major takeaway here is that fewer visible components do not mean less labor. When you look at a jelly tank, sure, it looks pristine and completely effortless, but behind the scenes, because you've lost that natural biological filter of a complex reef, the maintenance burden shifts heavily onto you. It becomes all about vigilant filtration performance and constant parameter tracking just to make sure the environment stays perfectly stable. Let's break down exactly what that entails with these water quality non-negotiables. Look, jellyfish are incredibly sensitive to their environment. Since they're mostly water themselves, sudden changes in water chemistry can be absolutely disastrous. You have to make any chemical adjustments very, very gradually. You need strict temperature stability, rock-solid salinity consistency, and you must carefully manage any nutrient buildup. All of this requires highly reliable equipment and a very strong baseline of mechanical filtration to support their long-term health and keep their stress levels down. Section 3. Feeding and compatibility. Now, with the water parameters fully locked in, we have to look at the day-to-day husbandry. What does it actually take to keep these gelatinous animals healthy day in and day out? Think about it. When your tank is mostly just water and a few floating creatures, how do you manage their diet without ruining that perfectly balanced, non-negotiable water quality we just talked about?
Let's see how this builds into a very specific, careful daily workflow. Step 1 actually happens before the food even enters the equation. You must establish water stability before stocking. It's a core safety principle. You can never, ever rush the tank cycling process. Once it's completely stable, step 2 is selecting species-appropriate food. And step 3? That is the absolute golden rule, practicing strict portion control. You see, generic marine feeding is just not a safe assumption when it comes to jellyfish. In a normal reef tank, scavenger fish or cleanup crews might eat the leftover food. But in a jelly tank, uneaten food just floats around or sits at the bottom and rapidly degrades the water parameters. If you feed them the wrong size food or simply give them way too much of it, that nutrient buildup we warned about earlier happens incredibly fast. Precise food sizing and strict portion control are absolutely essential for avoiding rapid, catastrophic declines in your water quality. And this need for precision also extends to picking the animals themselves. For beginners especially, single-species setups are highly recommended. Why? Well, because they're just so much easier to manage. You have far fewer variables to track. If you try to mix multiple jellyfish species together, you instantly introduce the risks of food competition and conflicting environmental needs. It's so much safer to master the specific temperature, flow, and dietary needs of one single species at a time before you even think about complicating the ecosystem. Section 4. A specialized marine spectacle. By now, it should be pretty clear that these setups require deep dedication. The source material summarizes it perfectly with this quote: "Jellyfish aquariums are best understood as specialized marine displays rather than simplified reef substitutes." And honestly, that is the core takeaway of our whole explainer today. You aren't just removing the rocks and corals from a reef tank to make things easier, you're stepping into a completely distinct marine discipline. It's literally a living, slow-moving piece of art that demands its own unique set of rules and routines. So the crucial point is this. If you're captivated by these beautiful creatures and you want to take the plunge, you absolutely have to do it in the right order. Research the specific jellyfish species first and build the equipment around its needs second. Please don't go buy a beautiful rounded tank and then try to figure out what fits inside it. Pick your jelly, learn its exact flow, temperature, and dietary requirements, and then, and only then, engineer the perfect habitat to support it. Which leaves us with one final big question for you to consider today. Are you prepared to completely shift your aquarium workflow to host the ultimate slow-moving spectacle? It's a real trade-off, letting go of the bustling, chaotic, colorful reef to embrace strict routines, pristine water chemistry, and mesmerizing translucent beauty. It's an incredible journey, for sure, if you're truly ready for it. Thank you so much for joining me on this Explainer Focus Learners. Now go do some deep diving on your favorite jellyfish species, and I'll see you next time.